Hi folks, my name is Paula MacLean and I'd like to welcome you to Mastering the Basics, the full 8-video program for supervisors and managers of not-for-profit organizations. And before we launch into Module 1, which is called Getting Off on the Right Foot, I want to just share with you a few introductory kinds of comments about the whole 8-video course. First of all, each video is somewhere around 45 minutes long. There are a few a little shorter and a few that are a little longer. So just plan your time around that time. You can certainly do each module, each video in 2 chunks, so that's perfectly fine as well. Make sure that you download and print the handout. The handout is all of the slides that I'm going to be using, and really helpful to have them to jot notes on. Use grayscale or black and white when you're printing them so you don't burn up all your color ink. But you'll have that handout in front of you. It'll be much easier to follow along with the slides that I'll be using. And also make sure that you download and print the workbook. It's attached to the first video, so you'll see it sitting there, and it has a bunch of good stuff in it, including study questions, discussion questions if you're working in a group of learners. It has some quizzes for you, and it also has a case study that allows you to kind of work through a what-if scenario, either individually on your own or in a group learning kind of situation. The videos can be stopped and replayed whenever you want. So if you get an interruption, or if you want to stop and have a conversation, if you want to stop and think about something, that is perfectly fine. You can come back to the videos as many times as you want. And in the next couple of days, I'd like you to do one thing, and that is that the people in your organization who have approved the purchase of this course have created an investment, a fairly substantial investment in the learners inside the organization who are leaders or emerging leaders, and I'd like you to go and thank them. You can send them an email, but even a face-to-face thank you would even be better. Just a thumbs up to say, you know, you're appreciating the opportunity for learning and appreciating the investment that's been made in you. I'd love to hear your comments about the course as we go along, either on individual modules, and there is a comment section below each one of the videos. So if you're, inclined to have just a minute to be able to make a comment, I'd love to see that, and I read every single one of them, and I'll even respond to some of you. And just a word of caution: if you're working in a group kind of environment with other people from other programs or teams inside your organization, I want you to be conscious of confidentiality. It is good and it is necessary to talk about your real life situations in the groups, but remember that what conversation you have is confidential. So it would be preferable if you didn't share names of individuals. You can share the real life circumstances, because that's what being a supervisor or manager and working through problems is all about. So team support, peer support is a really good idea, but just be really cautious. And if you have a big picture issue, that should be shared with your supervisor, your manager, your executive director, and seek out their support and advice and wisdom and all those years of experience inside your organization to try and help solve the issues that you're facing. But watch the confidentiality in your team, and please don't share anything after that. I want to talk just briefly about what the 8 videos cover. Each video will cover multiple topics. So we're going to be talking about the 5 leadership musts for supervisors and managers, 3 leadership style course choices, and great orientations for new employees. That's all in Module 1. So that'll be part of what we cover in this video. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about effective coaching strategies, and also about how to prevent performance issues, and good coaching and good mentoring is part of that. We want to really dive down into the whole area of creating an employee engagement and also on improving employee retention. And I want to talk to you about good teamwork and how we create good communication and good bonds inside our teams to increase our productivity and increase our overall engagement of the people who are working with us and for us. We're going to talk about how to manage employee performance issues, including how do we use progressive discipline properly. This is one of the thorniest and most difficult parts of the whole area of managing people. And I'll talk to you also about how to give good, constructive, critical feedback. It's one of the toughest things we do as supervisors and managers, and there's no reason for you to do it badly. There's every reason for you to learn how to do it well and to practice it and get ready to do it and be really kind of smooth and gracious when you give constructive, critical feedback. We're going to talk about successful delegation, and we're also going to talk about how to improve employee motivation and where motivation comes from. So that's that kind of rounds out the full 8-video series. You'll work through it at your own pace. If you're working as part of a group of learners, then I'm sure you'll be having a series of sessions. And make sure you consult your workbook for some of the guidance that you need around discussion questions and study questions and that sort of thing. All right, so having said that, let's dive into the whole area of the 5 leadership musts. Now, several years ago, I created this list, and the reason I created it, I wanted to distill all of the stuff that I've spent the last 25 years talking about in live group training. I wanted to distill it down into just sort of some key points, and I thought, in all of the work that I've done in the sector, all of the time that I've spent working inside not-for-profit organizations and as a consultant and trainer with hundreds, literally, of not-for-profit organizations, I thought, just take all of that and put it in a nutshell. So that's what these 5 leadership musts are. And the first one is that you must be present, both physically and emotionally. You've all had the experience of someone sitting through a meeting and they look like they're there physically, but they're answering texts, or they're off in dreamland, or they're not participating, and you just know that they may be physically present but they are not there emotionally or psychologically. And we really want to make sure that we understand all of the work we do as supervisors and managers is done through relationships with other people. So if you're not present, you don't have those relationships. If you have no presence, there is no relationship. So it's really important that you connect with people on both a physical level, in terms of your physical presence, as well as your emotional presence. Now, some of you supervise people who are itinerant. They are moving targets. And that physical presence can be a bit of a challenge. Use good technology. Make telephone touch bases. Make, and you do video conferences, do Skype, do FaceTime, whatever will work for you to make sure that you're connecting with people who may not be physically close to you and who you may only see, practically speaking, face-to-face only occasionally. Make sure that doesn't become an excuse for not being in a positive supervisor-employee kind of relationship with them. Second must is that you must listen, and we have 3 ears. I know you think we only have 2, but we have 3 ears. There's these 2. These 2 are the 2 that do the physical listening. And then we have a third ear, and if you think about your third ear, it's your intuition, it's your gut. Where is it? Well, in your gut, in your heart, somewhere in between. And your third ear listens with a little bit more analytical ability. It says, what am I really hearing? What is someone really trying to tell me? What's being left out of the communication that we're having here? So listening is absolutely critical, and I'm sure many of you have taken courses on basic communication skills. We talk about reflective listening and paraphrasing and all that sort of stuff, and that's all fine and good. But one of the things that's absolutely critical in my experience for good leadership, good supervisors and managers, listen well, and they listen with their third ear, their intuition. Third thing on the leadership must list is that we have to help people solve problems. It's one thing to listen, but if we listen, pat them on the back and say, oh, it sucks to be you, well, that's probably not what they came to hear. And we may not say those exact words. Of course, we wouldn't say those words. But very often what we've done has been supportive and been, an ear or a shoulder, but we haven't taken the next step, which is to say, how do we go forward to fix the problem that we're talking about here? It is cheap and easy to be a problem finder. It's much more difficult to be a problem solver. And good supervisors and managers are effective at facilitating problem solving. That does not mean that we spoon feed people solutions. It's not, well, here's how you do it, or I found that this has been helpful. We really want to understand what the issue is, and we also want to engage the person we're supervising in a conversation that says, what do you think? If we want people not to be attached by what I call the invisible umbilical cord, the mama cord, where the employee thinks, well, every time I have a problem, my supervisor has paid the big bucks to solve that problem. I'll just reel them in, and we'll have a conversation where I hand my problem off to the supervisor and they'll fix that problem. That creates dependency, and it creates lack of independent thinking and lack of autonomy. We want to build teams that are creative in the way they solve problems, and that begins by helping people solve problems in the right way. So that involves asking people good questions about what their ideas are, to get clarity on what the problem is first, and then also to draw from them what the best way of solving that problem might be. And of course, you have experience to bring to that. You have ideas that you can share with them, and that's really fine. But we don't want to spoon feed people. We want to help engage them and facilitate the problem-solving process. Fourth thing on our list for leadership musts is you have to be flexible. And one of the things we want to do is balance the amount of structure we have in our organization. Some structure is absolutely necessary, or we would have chaos. But the other side of it is if we have too much structure, too many rules, too many policies, the binder is just too thick. People will stop reading it. They just won't care about what the policies are because it's too much effort to go digging around to understand what they are. And secondly, they'll start making up their own rules, and those rules are not always the right rules. So what we want to do is make sure we have some flexibility built in around our policies, that we have a minimum number of core, basic, necessary policies, and that the rest of it we then trust to our supervisors, managers, executive directors, senior managers to be able to interpret things, and that we can adjust and be flexible. Now, one of the other things around policies is that when we create rules, we should be creating them for the 99% of people who need the rule and not the 1% of the people who always seem to mess up. And I'll bring up a pet peeve of mine, and that is dress codes. If we create dress codes around safety and protection of employees and the people that we serve, we are usually on very fine and good ground. But if we start creating dress codes that are outside of that, first of all, many of you who've served on dress code committees know what I'm talking about, and I can hear the laughter in the room right now. We know that we're on a really slippery slope when we start creating a whole bunch of detail in our dress code that says what people are allowed or not allowed to wear. And think about the fact that inside your workplace, whether you have 10 employees or 110 employees or 510 employees, 99% of the people come to work dressed professionally and dressed appropriately for their day, whatever their day will bring them. And 1% do not. And we do not need a whole bunch of dress code rules around that for 1%. So I'm sorry if I've offended some of you. No, I'm not sorry at all. I'm sorry if this is a difficult kind of topic, but what I want you to look at is I want you, when you create rules in your teams, in your programs, in your organization as a whole, I want you to be looking at creating rules that make sense to people. If they make sense, people will follow them willingly. And if you make rules that don't make sense, people will start to laugh at your rules. And they don't just laugh at the bad rules, they'll laugh at a lot of other rules, and they don't respect them. So we want to create rules, policies, procedures that are minimal, that apply to the 99%. They're absolutely essential to be having in place. So whether you're a senior manager listening to this video, or whether or not you're a program or a team leader or an emerging leader, I want you to take that forward into your work, is that we don't need rules for absolutely everything. Make rules for 99%. Final thing on the 5 leadership musts is that you must give feedback. Kind words are never thrown away. Constructive critical feedback, when given properly, corrects performance, helps people learn, has a positive intention behind constructive critical feedback, that we want people to be supported in learning how to do their job to the very best of their ability. And it creates engagement and independence over time to be able to be given feedback. And very often in human services work, we as supervisors and managers really struggle with how to do that. I'm going to devote a whole module to constructive critical feedback. And then finally, be a cheerleader. Some of the best executive directors and managers that I know are people who are really about being positive, that they see the good and even difficult days and difficult moments in organizational life, and they never seem to lose their optimism. And you cannot pay for that. It is absolutely an essential part of the work we do as supervisors and managers, and it's something that's not easily taught, and it's something that you choose to do as a supervisor or team leader, and people really respond to other people. It's kind of who are positive. It's almost like it vaccinates them against bad attitude and bad behavior, and it really helps lift up the team of people that you're working with. All right, so I want to talk now and just shift gears a little bit to leadership styles and the whole idea around what leadership styles are. And here's the principle behind this. No one leadership style will be the right leadership style for all people in all situations, okay? So what we want to do is we want to, first of all, understand the 3 leadership styles that are available to us. And then second, after we understand those, find out how do we match them up so that we get the right person and the right type of style of leadership that fits for them and the task or the activity that they are doing. So the principle here is that we as supervisors and managers have to be flexible, but in a very deliberate way. Flexible does not mean wishy-washy. Flexible means that I'm going to choose the right leadership style for this person in this situation. And it means 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, I might choose a second leadership style, a different leadership style with even the same person because the situation or the task has changed. So that's the principle that we're talking about between choosing the right leadership style. It's not one style, but it's a choice among three. Now, here's one of the things we also know is if we choose the wrong style, the wrong fit with the situation, the outcome will not be nearly as good as if we have the right match of leadership style and the person and the situation. So what we need to learn how to do then is we need to be able to assess the situation and the person or people that are in it and get the right match that is the right match for that moment, that person, that situation. Now, that requires that we be able to do a couple of things. The first thing we have to be able to do is to make sure that we understand that this is task specific. So we have to say, what is the task? And I'm going to give you a practical example in just a sec, so just hang on with me here. What is the task or the activity that needs to be done? And then secondly, what is the person's or people's interest and motivation in doing that task? Are they highly motivated, somewhat motivated, or not motivated at all? And second part of the second part is that what's their skill in being able to do that? Have they had lots of experience and they're really independent? Or are they brand new at this task? And the task may be kind of outside of their skill set or something that perhaps they're a little bit rusty with. They've done it before, but they haven't done it for a year or 2 years or whatever. So let me just give you an example. And that example is leading a team meeting. And I'm going to ask you to personalize this. So I want you to think of yourself having to lead a team meeting. And if you want to think of a different task, maybe you've got something that's kind of challenging you right now, by all means, replace my example of leading a team meeting with one that resonates and that fits for you. So that's perfectly fine. So you have to lead a team meeting, and the team meeting is next week. And now ask yourself a few questions about the situation you're thinking of, or in my example, the team meeting. And how motivated are you to actually do that? And how confident are you that you can do a good job? What are some of the results of team meetings that you've led in the past? You know, have they been productive and positive, or they've been kind of difficult or stressful, or maybe they've been kind of a mix of those two things? What's your actual skill in leading meetings? How proficient are you? How long has it been since you have done this? How much practice have you had? Is there a specific part of meetings that you sometimes have trouble with? Do you have trouble getting them started? Do you have trouble getting through an agenda item? Do you have trouble getting people focused and staying on topic when you get to an agenda item? Do you have trouble maybe getting the meeting ended on time and getting through the whole agenda? So is there a specific part of leading a team meeting, not the whole task, that you sometimes are challenged by or struggle with? And then I want you to say to yourself, if I have a pretty clear picture of my motivation and I have a pretty clear picture of my ability to do it, what would be what I would need from my supervisor or manager by way of assistance to get ready for leading that team meeting next week? And then you begin to think, okay, I think maybe I need this, I need that, I need this. So at any time that you want to stop your video and just kind of think this through using the questions that I've just asked you and that are in your handout, please do that. And then ask yourself another question. So how much help do you need, and what kind of help do you need to get through leading the team meeting? And the second part is, how much encouragement or support or feedback do I need from the person who's going to, guide me through this process? Do I need a big ton because I'm feeling kind of insecure and I'm brand new at this? Or do I need just a little bit because I've done a lot of team meetings in my life and I don't need a whole lot of help, and I also don't need a whole lot of feedback? Maybe at the end of the meeting I need, atta girl, that was a good job. Awesome work, right? So any of those things that we want to talk about have to be weighed against what kind of support do you need. Now, let's match this up against the 3 leadership style choices that we have. The first one is called coaching. And coaching is about hands-on teaching and guidance. right? So if you're brand new to this task, or you are kind of rusty with this task, or maybe you're having trouble with one particular part of the task, like keeping people on topic with one of the agenda items, coaching is going to be a really, really good approach. Coaching gives lots of task-focused direction. So this is about, hands-on guidance, lots of kind of positive feedback, a whole bunch of critical feedback that is constructive, meaning telling you what to do better or differently. And the 4 steps, and we'll talk more about this in the coaching module, but the 4 steps we go through with coaching is telling you how to do something, showing you how to do something, guiding you through the task, because you're just learning, and then watching you do this, and we call this independent practice. So those are the 4 steps of the coaching process. Now, remind yourself, we've got to get the right fit. If you are really independent in leading a meeting and we coached you through it, we would offend you. So coaching is, as nice as it sounds and as perfect and as appealing as it is not necessarily the go-to leadership style in all sorts of situations. Because if you have someone who's independent, competent, motivated to do it, can lead a meeting with their eyes closed, have done 100 of them, and you decide to coach them because you're their helpful, supportive supervisor, then guess what? It's not a good fit. So as appealing as coaching is, I don't want you to use it as, gee, this is good, I'm going to coach everybody. We don't always need coaching. We should not always be coaching people. The next leadership style we call challenging or facilitating. When we're challenging people, we are often asking the question, why? Or how come, why not? And what we're doing here is we're working mainly with people who have lost their motivation, who are fearful, who don't have confidence in doing a particular task. And we do this to help us understand, and I love the phrase, help me understand why, or help me understand about. And we're trying to figure out what are the barriers to the person doing what we need them to do. And so this really helps to overcome some of the resistance to doing certain things, particularly by people who are capable of doing a task or an activity but are not willing or motivated. It also helps people who have partial skills but are lacking confidence. Maybe they're a little bit fearful of taking the risk. And we always want to talk about having a discussion when we are challenging and facilitating. This is a two-way kind of give and take conversation, much different than coaching, which is hands-on, fairly task-oriented and directive. So you can see that with coaching, we use it with a certain group of people in certain situations, and with challenging and facilitating, we're going to use it with an entirely different group of people who are perhaps a little resistant, perhaps skilled, but kind of reluctant. And it's a much, much better leadership style. Now, challenging and facilitating is also much harder than coaching, and we're going to talk about challenging and facilitating in depth in another module. The last leadership style that's available to us is delegation. And we have a whole module devoted to that, but I really want to talk about delegation kind of broad brush for a second, and that is, this involves giving tasks to people that the tasks belong to you initially. So you're giving away things that you have the responsibility to do. So we want a clear understanding about what the outcome is, what the results are, what the time frames are. And delegation by definition is almost the reverse of coaching. It is hands-off rather than hands-on. When we delegate, we give the responsibility, the authority, the resources, the independence to be able to do a task individually. Now, when you think about who are we going to give that amount of independence to, that amount of autonomy to, you think this person better be highly skilled, because they're not going to get a lot of guidance or feedback, and they better be highly motivated and interested and confident in being able to do a particular task. So we're going to give a little bit of feedback and encouragement and guidance and advice, but mostly delegation is about being hands-off. Choose the right person to delegate to, make sure they have the skills, the ability, the time, and the interest in doing the task, and let them run. Right? We cannot delegate and then micromanage, right? That breaks down trust and it doesn't work very well. And if we delegate to someone who's not skilled, you can imagine the results. Hands off and not skilled don't go well together. So we need to understand that the match between the individual, the tasks that they have to do, and the leadership style has to be there in order for us to be successful as supervisors and managers. Now, I'm teaching this as one of our first things in the first module for a very specific reason. I learned this whole approach when I was a very young executive director. I was an executive director of a nonprofit agency when I was 26 years old. I can't believe that I really was. But I had the good fortune to head off to a major course. It was a 5-day program where I learned how to do this. I can tell you that in many years that followed in my career, this has been the most powerful and important tool and strategy that I have ever learned. And I had the good fortune of learning it very early on in my career. So I am hoping that this will be a huge benefit to you as well. Now, let me show you this on a graphic kind of chart. And you're going to see this chart more than once in our video training. And if you look at the chart along the bottom arrow, the blue arrow that's at the bottom on your screen, we look at the motivation or the interest in doing a task. And you can see it runs from left to right, from low to moderate to high. So think of this as a continuum. It's a slide that you have here. So how much interest does a person have? How much motivation does a person have? Is it low, a little better than low, moderate, a little better than moderate, or really high? Now look at the vertical pink axis on your chart, and you see that that's the current skill or ability level. And again, we have low, moderate, and high. So see it as the same kind of slide, and say every person on a task, any activity, has a mix of these two things. They have low, moderate, or high motivation, or somewhere along that continuum, and they have low, moderate, or high skill or ability to be able to do the task. Now remind yourself, skill is not theoretical. Skill is an actual proven ability to do something. It does not mean the person can tell you what they would do. It means that the person can actually do what they have to do. So there's a difference between being able to say it, because if you've met your average 4-year-old, they'll be able to tell you they can do a whole bunch of stuff that perhaps is a little dangerous if you let them do that. So we want to make sure that we understand that when we're dealing with employees, that we have to assess their real skill as opposed to their theoretical knowledge. Now what we see then is coaching, which is the first leadership style we talked about, has the broadest bubble on the chart, and it's right down at the bottom. Anyone who has low to moderate amount of interest, a low to high amount of interest, or motivation, is appropriate for coaching as long as they have low to moderate level of skill. So we do not coach people who have high levels of skill for obvious reasons. It's hands-on and directive. When we look at the second bubble, and that is the one in the top left-hand corner of the chart, we see challenging and facilitating. Useful with people who have low to moderate levels of motivation, but moderate to high levels of skill. Makes sense. We're going to pull out from them, draw out from them through conversation and asking questions about them doing the task. And then third strategy or third leadership approach we have is delegation. If you look at delegation, it's for people who are from moderate to high levels of motivation and moderate to high levels of independence and skill and ability in doing a particular task. All right, so now I want us to go back and ask the question, when we're talking about leading a team meeting, or whatever example you chose to use to illustrate this, when we are talking about leading a team meeting, what do you personally think is the best leadership style for you? So I want you to go back to that chart that we just looked at and say, what's my motivation and interest, and what's my skill? And then find yourself in terms of that task on that little leadership grid, and decide what is the very best thing that would be coming to me by way of my supervisor or my manager's leadership style. Now, I want you to then choose a real life example. I'm going to ask you to stop the video in a second, and I want you to work your way through a real life example. If you're working in a group of learners, you can have a conversation about 2 or 3 of these. If you're working individually, perfectly fine. Then answer these 3 questions. First of all, what's the skill or ability of a person to do the task? You can use yourself personally, or you can use somebody in your team. So you have to pick a skill. And if you're talking about somebody that's real, again, just consciously be aware of the confidentiality around that. So change a name or use initials or do whatever that kind of protects this from being too kind of out there. And secondly, what's the motivation or interest of the person to do the task? And thirdly, what's the best leadership style? So go back to that graphic on the previous page, and then talk a little bit in your group sitting, or work it through on a piece of paper in front of you. And you can stop the video now, and I will be here when you get back. All right, I'm back. Hopefully that was a useful little exercise. And again, if you go to your workbook, you'll see some other case studies and that sort of thing, so you'll be able to do some practice around that. I want to shift gears and just end off this video with some really cool stuff around orientation. And orientation is very often something that we underestimate the impact of. What we know is that orientation has a huge impact on employee retention. Effective and positive and comprehensive orientation that is long enough has a way of engaging people, of attaching them to you, to your team, to the organization. And when our organizations and teams and individual supervisors and managers do great jobs of orientation, we get off on the right foot, as the title of this module is, and we also know that we create a sense of belonging and attachment that improves motivation, has a huge impact on how long a person will stay with us. And people who feel like they've gotten enough out of their orientation go forward in their jobs with a great deal of confidence and a great deal of energy and enthusiasm for their work. So don't underestimate the impact of orientation. Now, here's a little test for you. I want you to think about how long your orientation is. I just want you to describe orientation, not in terms of all the tasks or the checklists or whatever you have. I want you to describe it just strictly in terms of time. Let me share with you a real quick little story. Not long ago, I was doing an interview of a bunch of relief staff, and I had a relief staff who said, I said, "How was your orientation?" And he said, "It was awesome. I got to work 3 whole orientation shifts." Now, he was working in a residential environment with youth. And what he said was, he said, "You know, it was so cool. I felt so welcome along. I got to work with different people." He said, "I worked a morning shift, I worked an afternoon shift, and then I worked a night shift." He said, "I've never had an orientation that good." And he said, "I've been working in the field for quite a while." And I thought, as pumped up as he was, 3 shifts is not an orientation. So I want you to answer the question, inside your organization, what in terms of time only is typically constitutes a normal orientation? And if you are measuring your orientation in any more or any less time than months, it's not long enough. Now I want to ask you another question. If you had the perfect orientation to your current job, if you had the ability to say, "This is exactly the orientation I need," how long would it have been? And my bet is you're going to answer the question, not 3 shifts, not 3 days, not 3 weeks, but at least 3 months. And for some of you who are relatively new in your role, you're going to say, 3 months was good, 6 months I was beginning to figure it out, and like 9 months I was beginning to actually feel confident in my work. Well, you are no different than most of the people you supervise. So we need to think about orientation in terms of time, and in terms of time related to how long and how many opportunities a person has to learn and grow. All of the tasks will be there, but we very often treat orientation as a few days or maybe a week or 2, and then we kind of think, oh, well, they're pretty fast steady, we've hired a good person, that's all great, and I can guarantee you that if it's under 3 months, they still don't have the whole picture. So we need to plan out our orientation for being long enough. Now, comprehensive orientation allows for a number of things, and I want you to identify the things that you think are most important when I'm going through this little list. But one of the most important things that orientation does, creates improved job satisfaction, morale, and motivation, and improved employee engagement. There's a ton of research literature, so you don't have to just buy what I'm saying, but it's absolutely clear. If we want to create engagement 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road, it starts the day the person was hired. And you, as leaders inside your organization, have an absolutely critical role in putting together an orientation program, both on paper and in person, that really begins to get this off on the right foot for new employees starting. It increases retention and reduces turnover. It improves the quality of services and clients, because there's not this, dead space where someone is wandering around not really knowing what their job is, or deferring to longer term staff who have been there for a little while longer, and they kind of just let them go with the flow and the new person kind of hangs back. That's not going to work. And the whole notion of, working by trial and error is just such an antiquated old way of, well, you'll watch, you'll catch on, it'll be okay, and we're all loosey-goosey about it. That is not going to improve services and quality to clients. And what we're really talking about here is that we do not, from the time that a person leaves us and has to be replaced, we don't want to have this big downtake in the quality of the work that we do. We want someone in orientation to be properly supported as a new employee so that they can become really successful in the role, and that the quality of service to our clients, our participants, our members, whatever you call them inside your organization, that quality does not suffer as a result of losing an employee and starting someone new. And then finally, what we know from the literature, from the research that's been done, is good orientation connects to less performance issues and then less need to use progressive discipline, constructive critical feedback, and any of those kinds of things. And it actually leads to less dismissals and less turnover down the road that is driven by the employer rather than the employee. So if you want to do less of the hard stuff a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, start getting your orientation in place and in order, and be systematic and long enough in how you do it. Now let me break orientation down into 3 chunks that are time related. And the first time that we want to talk about is the first week. So in the first week, got all that normal sign-on stuff, the paperwork, the confidentiality, the mission, the vision, the structure, all of that sort of stuff. So that goes usually in the first day or 2 of the first week. And then we often sit people down and have them read policy manuals. And look, I was there. I used to do it. It seemed like an important thing at the time. Let me tell you, what's most important is that they get out, meet people, know who their clients are, know who their coworkers are, and start to learn about the job. So put people and people contact before paper. Chances are, if you're sitting them down with a policy manual, it's fairly thick. If you're sitting them down to read nothing but policy, after probably an hour or 2, they're not even reading anymore. If you come by and float by and they're sitting there, they head down and the book is open, you say, "How are you doing?" They say, "Oh, I'm fine." Right? And you think, you're not fine. You stopped reading probably a half day ago. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we alternate people and paper. So a half day, just as an example, a half day in the program, in the team with the people they're going to serve. And then maybe an hour or 2 of reading. Another half day in the program and the team and the people. And then another hour or 2 of reading. And I really question the value of reading policy manuals at all. We often say on our checklist the person has to read it and acknowledge they've received it. If we have key policies, we should distill those down into maybe a dozen pages rather than 100 pages, and we should put those in front of the person and say, these are the 12 pages you have to know about. So, we sometimes do this in the form of an employee handbook, but pretty important that we do it so that the person can really know what they really need to know, and the rest of it, they need to know how to look it up. So make sure that policy is in the program location, and make sure you teach them what the sections are. And then if they have a question or a concern, or they have to look up what the policy is, they have to learn how to research it and look it up in the book. They do not need to read all of it, and they're not going to remember it anyway. So think about how you're using that time. And then we want to have people not just watching the work, but getting involved in the work. And this is really critical, that you have all of your program and team staff understanding that their job in orientation is to get the new person engaged, not just to, tell them how to do it and show them how to do it and have a passive observer of that, but actually get them engaged and involved. And it's really critical you have competent, skilled employees on the line who are supporting the new person coming in. And you want to check in at the end of the week, and do not make your check-in something like, "How's it going?" The answer is good. And they have that kind of deer stuck in the headlights look in their eyes, and you think, oh my God, are they okay? And you think, yeah, I think they're okay. They're just kind of on this big learning curve, and they're kind of overwhelmed by people and information and how big the job is. They may have come in thinking, this has got to be a piece of cake. I've got this. And then reality strikes, and they realize the job is a little bit bigger than they thought, a little more challenging than they thought. So ask real questions of, what are your questions? What are you concerned about? What experience have you had this week that scared you? What kinds of assistance or support or additional information do you need? And what are you not sure about or not clear on? What questions do you have for me that, I'm not sure about? This starts the relationship with a new employee if you're a supervisor or a manager. It begins the process of them saying, this supervisor cares about whether I'm scared, cares about whether I'm doing okay or not, and is asking really good questions, not kind of glossed over what I call counterfeit questions. You know, counterfeit bill is one that looks like $20 but really isn't. A counterfeit question is, how are you doing? It's not really a question. You don't really have, you have an implied answer, and that is, I'm doing fine. Right? So ask better questions and really mine down to figure out what you need to do after that first week to get the person onto a path where they're feeling really comfortable. Now, phase number 2 is the first month. So we got the first week taken care of. Now let's go to the next month. First of all, we want full engagement in all aspects of the job. During this 4-week period, we really want the employee to be doing everything. And if you have a really high-tech kind of job, then maybe it'll take them a little longer than a month. But what we're asking them is to step up and be a fully engaged staff member or member of the team. Secondly, we want to do lots of coaching in skill-specific areas, which is one of the reasons at the end of the first week you ask the specific questions you do is, where do you need more help, more information, more guidance, more direction? And what we're doing here is we're saying coaching is a great leadership style for people who are new, because we can go hands-on, tell, show, guide, practice, and be able to help them put this whole thing together in this next 4 weeks. We want to create a supervisory system that allows for weekly meetings for all new employee with their direct supervisor. If your staff are itinerant, if they're moving targets and they're off doing outreach or follow-up or community work, then by all means make this a FaceTime, make this a video conference, do anything that you can. Even a phone call is fine. Email is not fine. That's not a meeting. It's not face-to-face. But create a system with that employee to meet with them every week for the next 4 weeks for 30 to 60 minutes. Ask them to bring their agenda to this table, to the table with you. So it's their questions, their concerns, their ideas, their experiences, their challenges, their positive kinds of outcomes that they've been able to achieve. And then if there's a need for formal training, start making the connections for the formal training that's there, and otherwise continue to coach. And then finally, at the end of that month, and each of the 4 meetings you have them through the month, but at the end of that month, begin to ask, continue to ask the questions that you've asked before, which is, where do you need additional support? Where are you struggling? What are you worried about? What are you wondering about? So that's the second phase, the first month. Now, the next phase then is the next 3 to 6 months, okay? So I'm going to suggest that your kind of orientation period be a little bit flexible. You might have something specifically in policy that says our probationary period is 3 months or 6 months. Often then your orientation should mirror whatever your probationary period is. And what we want to see with people is we want to see increasing independence around the job duties. We want to make sure that we give them ongoing coaching to refine their skills. We want to ask them to do some stretch assignments, to take on some new things that keeps them learning, doesn't let them get too routinized. And so begin to challenge them with some new opportunities to learn. Continue your one-to-one meetings. Negotiate with the person how often you will meet. So that usually is every 2 to 3 weeks. And how long you'll meet each time. A half hour to an hour is usually plenty and enough. And then at the end of the probationary period, you want to do an appraisal of that individual's performance and begin to write some goals around what's the next 6 months or 8 months or year going to look like. And I've given you a little acronym here, SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time defined. And I've given you a sample goal. And we might write some specific objectives under that goal. There are little kind of the steps towards the goal, and that would be fine as well. But at the very least, we want to say to this person during their probationary evaluation, let's work out the ongoing learning plan for you. Goals are not just there to correct performance issues. Goals are positive and proactive ways of keeping this employee engaged and learning for the long term inside your organization. All right, the final thing I want to talk about in this module is I want to spend a few minutes talking about what is probation. Probationary period is usually 3 months. It can be as long as 6 months. Rarely is it any longer than that. This is a policy-driven thing. So your policy, or if you have a union in your organization, you'll have a collective agreement that will say, this is the term of our probationary period. And you need to make sure that your probationary period and your policy lines up with what your provincial or state or territorial rules are. These are usually called your employment standards regulations. And you want to make sure that your probationary period lines up with what your employment standards regulations are. So that will often say 3 months. So very often we see in not-for-profit organizations a 3-month probationary period. Probation is seen as a trial period, and it's often our opportunity to be able to see as an employer, is this a good fit for us? Did we make a good hire? And from the employee perspective, is it a good fit for me as an employee? And did I choose a good employer? I had a person in a workshop years ago who was probationary, and she said she got called up on the carpet for something. She was really quite offended. Maybe it wasn't handled as well as it might have been, but she got some critical feedback that she kind of took exception to. And she said, if this keeps up, I'm going to fire my employer. Which is really an interesting perspective on how we look at probation. So she was seeing very clearly as an employee that the employer was on probation as well. So we have a 3-month or a 6-month or something close to that trial period, during which time we find out, is there a good fit? Now, during the probationary period, we don't just let kind of people start and muddle along on their own. This is maximum training, maximum coaching, maximum learning time, lots of supervision, lots of feedback. And we have to make sure that that orientation is very tight and almost orchestrated. It's a fairly strong word, but I like it when it comes to probation. In most jurisdictions, probation is also important because it looks at what the law says, and the law usually says that during the probationary period, we as an employer can dismiss an employee without any cause, without any notice. So no reason and no notice means we don't have to pay them. And we also are not subject to a legal action, a lawsuit that comes from that dismissal. So this becomes kind of important because if we find out that the match is not a good one, it's very important if you've done your job well as supervisors and managers, and you have done maximum coaching, maximum learning, maximum support in your orientation program, and it is not just working out, dismiss inside what your provincial, territorial, or state government says is the normal probationary period. Meaning if it's 3 months, you should dismiss the person inside that 3 months. That's never a fun thing, and we are going to talk about the proper ways of doing employee dismissals, but it has a significantly lowered risk attached to it. So the employee that's dismissed, as long as you have not violated their human rights in any other way, the employee who is dismissed cannot come back and sue you for what we call wrongful dismissal. Now, final points around orientation then is I just want to give you some ideas here, and you can mind down and have some fun with this inside your organization as you fine-tune and improve your orientation process. The first one I love is to send people a welcome card, have everybody from the team sign it, have clients or families or whoever you're working with in your organization sign it, and give them a big welcome. You know, we give big going away parties. And frankly, for all the effort it takes to bring somebody new into the organization, we should be given really big welcome parties instead, or in addition to. We want to make sure that if we have a lag time between the time that we hire the person, the time they start, that we invite them to attend organizational events, whether those are social or celebratory, or whether it's just something as simple as a team meeting. Make sure you get the confidentiality stuff and the initial sign-up stuff done, but getting people engaged early on if we have an opportunity. I love the idea of a day in the life video. We need consent and confidentiality things signed off first, but it's really cool to have a day in the life video where we actually have someone, showing what it's like. And the one I saw years ago was really cool. And we had a shot of a video of an alarm clock on the video, and it said 5:30 a.m. and the person went out and started their car. And they were an outreach staff. It was wintertime. It was cold. They made their breakfast. They got their kids going, and they headed out for work probably about 6:30 in the morning. And it was really, really compelling in terms of helping people understand the nature of the work that we're about to do. Now, we're not going to try to scare people off, but what the reality is that why not tell them what their job is really like? There's nothing wrong with that. They've agreed to work for you. And so really important that we begin that orientation early. orientation by teaming up. We often team up longer term employees with new employees, and that's okay. But shorter term employees, people who've been there maybe a year or less, are often the people who really can commiserate and know what being overwhelmed for the first few weeks is like, what it's like to have, a learning curve that's off the charts. So teaming up newer employees with brand new employees is a good strategy because it creates a sense of belonging and identity around some of your newer folks. And it also says, I was there a year ago and I got through it and it was okay. Your longer term staff may be able to be more comprehensive in the information they provide, but very often they've forgotten what it's like that first few weeks on the job when they're kind of overwhelmed and, maybe go home in tears a couple of days because the work is way harder than perhaps that they initially thought. I like having whole team involvement in developing team-based orientation. Your organization should have an umbrella orientation, but it's really a good idea for the whole team to create a checklist, the steps, what it's going to look like, and that ensures that the whole team takes ownership individually and collectively. Ownership on the whole area of, what creates a sense of belonging and what will create a sense of relationship, as well as what skills does a person need and what kinds of things do they need to be able to do. Create a buddy system where the employee has a one-on-one connection so that they can ask questions, they can debrief their day. If the supervisor is not available, they can give a little guidance or advice from their buddy. If they miss a team meeting, they can get a fill-in from the team meeting from their buddy. You make sure you have regular check-ins, regular meetings with the employees, immediate supervisor. Be on high alert for problems and practice early intervention around those problems. So if the person's not doing their job well, or they're skipping stuff, or they don't know how to do something, really important we get in there and practice early intervention around correction, coaching, constructive critical feedback. Make sure that you have the training that's in place that everyone needs to know for the new skills, and remind yourself not all employees come to a new job equally skilled. So what one person doesn't need to touch because they know how to do it, other people will need formal training or additional support around, and that's the nature of the beast. That's why we're in our supervisory roles, and we have to be alert for those kinds of training opportunities and provide what the employee needs. Remember that your seasonal, your part-time, your casual, your relief people all need a good orientation, and don't leave them out. Do as much or more, in some cases, orientation for your relief staff as you would do with other staff who are in full-time or permanent positions, because often relief staff work all over the place. So they need more orientation, not less. And make sure that at the end of the day, 6 months every year, something like that, you do an orientation review and bring some of your newest team members, your newest employees onto a committee and say, what orientation experience did we give you? What changes or positive kinds of things could you comment on? And we're asking them to, feedback to us the stuff we're doing right, what the new employee really appreciated. We'll put tick marks in our column. We got that one nailed down. And then also what could have been better or different, and make ongoing tweaks and adjustments to your orientation process. We call this bootstrapping, and it really means if you think about a tall boot with laces that go over and over each other like this, what we want to do is we start at the bottom of the boot and we have the best orientation we can think of. And then 6 months later, we put another loop up and we say this is better, and we keep bootstrapping all the way along, and that is the way we create improvements in systems and processes that make it a better place to work for everybody, better for supervisors, managers, and every single member of the team. That brings us to the end of Module 1. Please do go to your workbook and cruise through the section in the workbook on Module 1. And until next time, my name is Paula MacLean. I'm your video coach, and I'll look for you again in Module 2. Take care.